And that leads us to the very end, boys and girls, the absorption, the digestion and absorption of nutrients. And we are going to be primarily looking at the macronutrients, carbohydrates, proteins, and lipids. We'll briefly talk about water. We'll briefly talk about the micronutrients, which are vitamins and minerals. But for all intents and purposes, what I'm going to be asking about on the exam, will involve the macronutrients. We are going to start with carbohydrates because this is the primary provider of energy for the body. Carbohydrates, fats, proteins, carbs, fats, proteins in order of most significance of their functions being to provide energy for them. When we look at carbohydrates, guys, we have three major types. Monosaccharides is glucose and fructose. Those are the only two I put up there. There's another one. Don't worry about it. All right. These are the two major ones. These are the ones that are found in primarily the foods that you can consume. Disaccharides, and mono means one, saccharide means sugar. Okay, so I'll put that up here. That means one, and saccharide is sugar, S-U-G-A-R. Okay. Di, two sugars, poly is many. These things are, tens of hundreds of change of glucose molecules long, so pretty complex. Where does carbohydrate digestion begin? It begins in the mouth, right? With our salivary amylase. And I believe I have that on the next slide. Ultimately stops in the small intestine, gets picked back up through the digestion process within the small intestine, ultimately trying to get these down for absorption within the small intestine as well. Again, where does breakdown begin for carbohydrates? Carbohydrate breakdown begins in the oral cavity with salivary amylase. Helps to break down starch. Remember, getting that down to some glucose molecules. Now, starch food, right, does not stay in your mouth for really an extended period of time. It's only there as you're chewing the food. So it's not going to do a whole hell of a lot of digestion, but it will initialize the process. And this will continue as it goes down the pharynx and as it goes down the esophagus as well. In the stomach, carbohydrate breakdown stops because of the very acidic pH within there. Deactivates the enzyme. Sits there in the stomach as the stomach churns and then empties out into the duodenum, the small intestine, where we have pancreatic amylase. Pancreatic amylase, right? We know it is made by the pancreas. And this is what continues the digestion of starches within the small intestine. This helps to break down any, again, starch that initialize the breakdown within the mouth there with salivary amylase, breaking down into some glucose molecules, inactivated in the stomach, picks back up again in the small intestine with pancreatic amylase. And it helps to break down longer chain carbohydrates into smaller chain carbohydrates, into tripeptides or dipeptides, okay? The intestinal cells that line the small intestine, they will also secrete some enzymes. Dextrinase, glucoamylase, but let's remember that one, maltase, okay? Maltase helps to break down disaccharides, right? 2 glucose molecules is a disaccharide. Dextrinase and glucoamylase, they get secreted again. They help to break down oligos. Oligosaccharides are generally like 8 to 10, anywhere from like 4 to 10 amino acids long. That's specifically what does it. But just remember maltase, okay? Whenever you see ASE on the end, you always assume an enzyme. Maltase gets secreted by the intestinal cells that line the small intestine, and that helps to break down these smaller chain of amino acids into the individual amino acids, glucose, okay? We, you can see there's lactase. I put it on here because it's common. It's in milk and milk products. So lactase is here. If you don't have a, if you don't have enough lactase, you can't break down lactose, which is a disaccharide. You can kind of teach your body how to do it. Doing small, consuming small amounts of, consuming small amounts of milk products to slowly build up. But if you can't, it's lactose intolerant. Sucrase would break down sucrose. So these are some other enzymes as well that get secreted by the intestinal cells, those brush border cells. So that's what we have there. As the intestinal enzymes have done their secreting, they will, again, break down these disaccharides into monosaccharides. And it's the monosaccharides that get absorbed. Monosaccharides are absorbed. Again, we bring them across into the intestinal cell, pass them through the intestinal cell, and then they enter into circulatory system. Glucose is what we primarily utilize. Glycogen is the glucose, is the version of it that it's the storage form of glucose. So if you consume too much carbohydrates, you convert it into glycogen. Once you've filled up your glycogen stores within muscles and in the liver, then you convert the rest to the F word. No one likes the F word, okay? And that F word is fat. Glucose gets transported throughout the circulatory system, gets picked up by different cells to make energy. It does the same thing to fructose and galactose, which is your other simple sugar monosaccharide. Fructose goes to the liver, has to be converted and made into glucose that your body then utilizes. Galactose gets converted as well, but those take several steps, and I don't want to get into that. Carbohydrate that can't be broken down, like cellulose. We don't have enzymes to break down cellulose, but that's okay. All right, this is what the bacteria will feed off of. So there's a tiny bit of breakdown, but not a whole hell of a lot. But it does provide bulk. Fiber is an example of a cellulose product, of a polysaccharide. Fiber can't be broken down by us. Again, the bacteria eat it up. We use it to add bulk, which helps us to have an easy bowel movement. If you don't eat enough plants, if you don't have enough cellulose within your diet, plant products, you don't have this bulk, so your bowel movements are not very regular and they're much more difficult to do because it's that push on the wall of the intestine that really stimulates the haustra and the tinea coli to get those mass movements to occur. Protein digestion. For protein digestion, we want to break down the peptide bonds in between all of those amino acid subunits, okay? That's all that a protein is, amino acids strung together. These are done by enzymes, as you might imagine, and we're going to see those enzymes. Well, we talked about those enzymes earlier. We'll mention them here again. When it comes to protein digestion, it does not begin in the mouth. I'll repeat that again. It does not begin in the mouth. Chemical digestion. If you want to give me the rigmarole of yes, it does, it's mechanical, sure. I'll shake your hand and tell you are very correct, all right? But in terms of chemical breakdown, that really doesn't happen until the stomach. I need the high acid content of the stomach to help us to make, remember, pepsin, which is then going to facilitate the breakdown or the denaturation of proteins. So protein digestion does not begin until the stomach. We have a number of cells, We have a number of enzymes that get secreted into the small intestine to further along the digestion of proteins. Enteropeptidase is one that may be on your slide. I'm not going to ask about it. Enteropeptidases, entero means intestines. ASE is enzyme. Peptid is protein. So enteropeptidases are just enzymes that activate everybody. And when I mean activate everybody, activate, all of these inactive forms: trypsin, chymotrypsin, carboxylpeptidases, or procarboxypeptidases, I guess I should say. All three of these, and these are the ones that you should know, guys: trypsin, chymotrypsin, and carboxylpeptidases. These are all secreted by the pancreas. And these all help to break down amino acid into as small a unit as possible. Ideally individual, but dipeptides can be absorbed as well. Okay, so trypsin, chymotrypsin, and carboxylpeptidases secreted by the pancreas. Excuse me. These help to break down proteins from the larger units that leave the stomach into as small a individual unit as possible. There's your dipeptidases. Okay. Dipeptidases, there's some tripeptides as well, but dipeptidase, ASE, again, is an enzyme. Dipeptidase gets secreted by the intestinal cell, and that helps to break down those last individual amino acids. So we have trypsin, chymotrypsin, and carboxylpeptidases secreted by the pancreas, and we have dipeptidases secreted by the intestinal cells. We get this all down to an individual amino acid. Again, we absorb the amino acid into the intestinal cell, pass it through it, and dump it into the circulatory system. Lipids, just as easy as everybody else. When we look at lipids, we are basically talking about triglycerides and cholesterol. Triglyceride is made up of a glycerol molecule and 3 fatty acid chains. Okay. Enzymes are required to break the bonds between all of the carbon atoms. Enzymes are going to be required to cleave off all these hydrogen ions. So there's going to be a lot of work and action. These provide a lot of units of energy. These provide 9 kilocalories per unit. Proteins and carbs are just providing a hell of a lot less, 4 units. So fat is going to be your biggest provider of energy, but it has a difficult time of just surviving alone on lipids. It's beta hydroxy. It's beta oxidation. I think I made reference to it earlier when we were talking about respiratory system with hydrogen ion concentration increase. So cholesterol, we can just absorb that. But if for whatever reason, if we absorb too much, it'll just get deposited on the walls of your arteries. So not a good thing to consume a whole hell of a lot of cholesterol. Some is needed. Makes hormones, makes a lot of fantastic structures. You don't need a whole hell of a lot of it though. Breakdown for lipids. Well, the tongue secretes a lingual lipase, but that lingual lipase is not fully activated actually until it reaches the stomach. So there's not a whole heck of a lot of digestion that's occurring in the mouth with lipids. The only one that does is the carb. Everybody else starts in the stomach. So that lingual lipase, when it reaches the acidic content of the stomach, becomes activated. And it will start to break down the fat or emulsify the fat. The stomach also has a secretion called gastric lipase. If I ask the question, lingual lipase, who secretes it or where is it secreted from, you would say the mouth or tongue. Lingual means tongue. Gastric lipase, gastric means stomach. So you would tell me that's from the stomach. There's a pancreatic lipase. Who secretes that? The pancreas. It's that easy. Gastric lipase was produced by those chief cells that we saw. And you can see, excuse me, helps to break down those triglycerides into diglyceride and a free fatty acid chain. These things enter into the small intestine. And we have secretions here as well. the pancreas gets in the game. The pancreas secretes pancreatic lipase. It helps to break down that disaccharide, the diglyceride into a monoglyceride. Okay. So I've completely broken this thing down. I've got all the 3 fatty acid chains broken down, and I got just a little glycerol molecule. And the body's going to use all of it. Okay. It's going to use all of it. Because these are lipids soluble, they're going to start to congeal together. They don't like water. So we need something to help emulsify these things and keep them from congealing back together. And that's what bile salts are going to do. Bile gets released by the gallbladder. Remember, it's produced by the liver. And bile salts are going to get in on this action. Bile salts are emulsifiers, all right? They are amphipathic. What does that mean? That means they have a polar head, excuse me, and a nonpolar tail. Okay. So they arrange like this. Okay. Polar heads are arranged towards the water, and the non-polar tails are orientated away from the water. And I can carry all my parts and pieces that I broke apart together. And I don't allow this thing to congeal back together. This structure right here is referred to as a micelle. Okay, as a micelle. Micelle is important in this whole process of triglyceride or fat breakdown and absorption. I have spent the entire time getting this all broken down. And then I surround it in bile salts, and there's the micelle. Okay, the micelle is what brings this thing close to the surface of those intestinal cells, as you can kind of see right there. And this is what allows these digested parts, the free fatty acid chains and the glycerol molecule, to be absorbed into the intestinal cell. Once it's inside the intestinal cell, triglyceride gets reformed. Okay, it basically unpackages itself out of the micelle and kind of starts to reconstitute back together. We then package this up with cholesterol that we've absorbed and some of the proteins that we've absorbed, the amino acids. And we make this structure called a chylomicron. Okay, again, chylomicron is the free fatty acids, cholesterol, the triglyceride, with or glycerol molecule, cholesterol, and proteins, all wrapped in this structure. Chylomicron gets released from the intestinal cell and enters into the lymphatic capillary, those lacteals down there. Those lacteals, that's what absorbs the chylomicron. Chylomicron travels through the lacteal system, enters into the subclavian and back into the circulatory system, and now it can go and travel around and be distributed, providing energy. And in nutrition class, we get into that a heck of a lot more. We just don't have time here. It's more of a nutrition thing. Again, I'm just going to primarily ask you a heck of a lot more questions about macros. Water, small intestine absorbs it. Large intestine absorbs it. As you can kind of see, the small intestine is the major absorber of it. So, whatever. The rest is just passed out through fecal matter. In water is electrolytes, your minerals. So the majority of all of your absorption of water is in the small intestine, and shockingly, the absorption of the vast majority of electrolytes is within the small intestine as well. How they're absorbed can be a little bit complex. I'm not going to ask about iron. Who cares? It has a very controlled regulation. A lot of minerals are controlled. So I don't really know why the book just singles out iron, but just know where electrolytes are absorbed. The vast majority of them is within the small intestine. Vitamin absorption just depends on who you are. If you're a fat soluble vitamin, okay, you get absorbed with lipids within those micelles into the lymphatic system, ultimately back to the circulatory system. Water soluble vitamins, water fat soluble vitamins, A, D, E, and K. Water soluble vitamins are your B vitamins and vitamin C. These are absorbed and transported into the circulatory system. I won't ask about B12. We didn't get into it, so I'm not going to talk about it. What are the vitamins? Fat soluble, A, D, E, and K, absorbed into the lymphatic system because they're fat soluble. Water soluble vitamins are vitamins B's and the C vitamin. These guys dissolve or absorbed into the circulatory system through different mechanisms. I'm not going to ask, but they enter into the circulatory system and go to the liver that way.